Story 1. Painted the big toenail. It doesn't take long as a parent of identical twins to figure out who is who. We had the toenail painted for maybe a week before it was easy to tell who was who. Story 2. Back in the 90s, a tiny drop of nail polish on the toe. Being careful to be sure they can't put their foot in their mouth. Different color clothing. Most importantly, using their names with them individually is super important. Repetition of their names means they will start to look and respond to their own names early. Story 3. As an adult identical twin, I have wondered many times if we were accidentally switched as babies, and all this time I've really been Tom. This is an actual shower thought of every identical twin. Laughing out loud. Story 4. So this would be 2011. They put a hat with baby A on my first son and a hat with baby B on my second, as well as bracelets. I was with them the whole time for the weighing and vitals check, and they take footprints right away. For my wife's sanity, she put a little Sharpie dot on baby A's sole of his foot. Then, within a day, you kind of just knew. They're identical, but family and all their friends can tell them apart pretty quickly, even if you try and trick them. It's tough to explain unless you have friends that are twins. Then you understand it. I still call them the wrong name, but all parents do that. I called one by the dog's name once. That cost me an apology and a Lego set. Story 5. When our twins came along, we decided to assign each a color. One was always in blue, the other in green. It started off as a practical thing, but as they got older, they each developed a preference for their own color. It became part of their individual identity. As funny as it sounds, that color coding stuck with them, and now as teenagers, their rooms are themed around their colors, their gadgets, and even their bikes. It's hilarious looking back at baby pictures trying to figure out who's who, but now we can tell them apart by the color aura they literally chose to live. Story 6. Got some baby toenail polish. Baby A was painted pink, baby B was purple. After they got a little older, I could look at their faces and tell them apart. When they learned their names, they would let you know if you got them confused. Also, baby B's cry was a little more screechy than her sister's. Story 7. Silly story. A long time ago, when I was 12, I think, I learned this really cute girl from my class who I had a crush on had a brother. I met the brother a year or two younger than us and started a friendship, in part because he was her brother, in part because he was actually a cool kid. And so, over weeks, we developed a cool friendship, chatting about random things in the courtyard every now and then. Until one day I see this kid standing next to his identical twin brother. And both of them look at me, smile and say, "Hey, how's it going?" Summary. For weeks, I had developed a friendship and chatted with both of them, unaware there were two of them. But, because I knew they were related to my classmate, we never bothered with names. Story 8. I was so afraid of mixing them up. When I brought them home, they still had their hospital stickers attached to their backs, so that was helpful. It was funny, but they were different weights, so that also helped, and it wasn't nearly the problem I thought it would be. Sometimes I can't tell them apart in baby pictures, and they definitely can't tell themselves apart, but I have no fears that they were mixed up. Story 9. Baby A had an internal fetal heart monitor, which caused a small scab on her scalp. Those first few days, that scab was our only reference, up until we did the one toe with nail polish trick. Story 10. I babysat identical twins. The parents dressed them the same and gave them names one letter different from each other. So name-wise I couldn't distinguish them, but visually I could. One twin was skinnier and smaller than the other, not by a dramatic amount, but enough that you could see it. Their father was clueless and just drew on the kid's feet with something, so they were literally numbered. The thicker twin was 1 and the skinnier twin was 2. Also, it was weird to see they had a favorite twin. Story 11. My father and his brother came home from the hospital at different times. Knowing my grandmother, she probably had a good handle on one twin's mannerisms by the time the other came into the equation. Story 12. It wasn't that hard. One was always just a bit chunkier than his brother. That one also had a scar on his chest from when liquid was removed from his lung. The freckles are different. They sound different, have different mannerisms. For my own ease, I dressed them in different colors, and I tried to keep bracelets made of embroidery floss on them. That didn't work entirely to plan. One would always rip his off, but the other really liked his bracelet, and I had to replace it when it got worn for the first 4 years of his life. People have a hard time mentally handling twins, especially identical ones, but they're just two brothers who look very related. Story 13. My mom had identical triplet boys. One had a little birthmark, a soft spot on his head that was easily identifiable, so he was good. The other two looked exactly the same. My mom says she always knew, which I'd believe. My dad didn't know anything, though, and wanted to tattoo their initials onto their heels. Obviously, everyone vetoed that and settled on painting the big toenail of baby 1 and leaving baby 2 blank. Story 14. Not identical, but close enough at birth that it was hard to tell them apart. I did colors, as someone else mentioned, but one has 2 scars from surgeries at 2 and 3 days old. When I was half asleep and delirious, I'd check for the scars. My cousin painted one of her twins' big toenails to distinguish. Story 15. Identical twins stop looking identical when you know them. Mom said that as newborns, she color-coded my brothers, but it wasn't for her benefit. It was for everyone else. My brothers don't even look alike to me anymore. Story 16. The hospital bracelets were invaluable to start, then we just painted one of their toenails. We had to really keep up with the repainting though, because if they were naked there was no way to tell them apart. Eventually, we started dressing each in certain colors, and when they got old enough they got to pick their own color. One had a freckle near an elbow we tracked as well. I liked the idea of doing a permanent facial scar thing like Tomax and Zamet, but since they're girls my wife said that was a bad idea. Story 17. The thing about being a parent of twins is that you become hyper-attuned to the smallest differences between them since they completely dominate your life for well over a decade. You find even the tiniest markers in case you're not sure. A mole on their left foot or a slight bend in an earlobe, the way they say a particular word, and so on. Story 18. I think dressing them in slightly different outfits or adding unique accessories like hats or socks works. Not only does it help you keep track of who is who, but it will also be a cute keepsake. Story 19. Kept the hospital bracelets on as long as possible. However, there was also a 20% weight difference, and the larger one was significantly jaundiced, so they were different colors for the first 6 weeks or so. Story 20. I'm an identical twin, and my sister and I, along with some siblings, were adopted when we were almost 3. We were in foster care for a year due to abuse and neglect. My biological mother would make a fuss about people calling my sister and me by the wrong names, although she wouldn't show up for court, claiming we were switched. We knew our names at that age, and they eventually straightened it out, but I've always wondered. Story 21. I have twin nieces. As an infant, one had something I was told is referred to as a stork bite on her nose, which is essentially a couple of very small veins on her nose. It was easy to tell as long as she wasn't screaming, as the wrinkles from an angry baby face would hide the veins. After a year or two, it was easy to tell them apart by their bearing. They had very different attitudes, stances, and mannerisms. Story 22. You just look at them. They are not perfect copies of each other. The first thing I look for in twins is head shape. Often one will have a wider head, and the other will have a narrow head. Story 23. All these people saying it doesn't really matter. What's it like to go through life without so much as an ear infection? It does matter which one gets the treatment. Story 24. I've known about 5 sets of twins closely while attending school and university. After you get to know their personalities, it's easy to tell them apart. As babies, I'd recommend temporary tattoos. Story 25. My parents just gave up. They just mash our names into one name and call us both that. 30 years later, we both still get called John Joe like it's one name. Story 26. My aunt has twins, and for the first couple of years of their lives, our family was like, "Which one are you?" The twins learned pretty quickly to be like, "I'm name." Story 27. Not the parent, but the uncle who helped out a lot color coding. One of them only wore purple and the other one only wore pink until they were old enough to be able to remember their own names. Parents were incredibly firm that nobody changed their outfits ever without express permission to ensure nobody screwed up their system. Story 28. As a stepmother to fraternal twins and a biological mother to identical twins and fraternal twins, One thing I did with my identical twins is I always watched their eye color. Even though they are identical, I noticed how my identical twin daughter's blue eye color would change. One of my twins has her left eye dark sapphire blue and her right eye light sky blue, whereas her twin sister has her left eye light sky blue with her right eye being dark sapphire blue. Story 29. So while my boys were still in the neonatal intensive care unit, we painted a toenail of each a different color. Then as they grew older, I started dressing them in certain colors. Blue for one, green for the other. Now, when I go back to photos, it's easier to tell who's who. Story 30. Identical twin here. I was quite a bit bigger and rounder than my brother, so if you saw us both at once, it definitely wasn't too difficult to see who's who. Also, I always got red stuff while my brother got blue stuff, so that probably helped. Story 31. We used to paint the eldest's big toenail green and the youngest's purple, because that's the alphabetical order of those two colors. We would remember who was the eldest twin. Story 32. My friend who has identical boys said it was only an issue for the first 2 or 3 weeks. After that, they could tell one from the other. Prior to that, though, she said they didn't really worry about it. The two names kind of settled on the kids when they got to that stage where they could differentiate. Story 33. My aunt is 110% sure that her twins Jackie and Jenny are not living as 45-year-olds with their hospital birth names. Despite dressing them in twin outfits with alternating pocket sides, we used to call Jackie lefty and Jenny righty. I don't think it really matters. It's just a name until they get old enough to have a personality that identifies them. They did a correction of names at about 1 year old, took the baby footprints from the hospital and compared them. They were cross-named. It's good now, though. Maybe I can tell them apart now from how they say hi, their eyes, and their hugs when we meet. Jackie is a tight hugger and wide-eyed. Jenny gives a grandma-like hug, and her eyes exude compassion. They have twin attributes like speech and finishing each other's sentences, but are as different fundamentally as it gets. Good luck. Story 34. We had our twin girls in 2021, and they told us in the hospital that they put a clamp on the umbilical cord right after birth. The firstborn twin always gets 1 clamp, and the second twin gets 2 clamps. After that, they had wristbands with their names on them and, to be absolutely sure, bands around 1 foot as well. But I remember feeling like a bad mother because, for the first 3 to 4 weeks, I couldn't tell them apart. Now, I don't even need to see the face to know which one is which. Story 35. There was someone on a different thread somewhere who had identical twins. One had a heart condition and needed medication to survive. That medication could hurt or kill a healthy baby or child. They got a medical tattoo on the sick child. It looked like a freckle on the child's earlobe, if I recall correctly. Story 36. Father of identical twins here. Green nail polish on the right foot of boy A and blue nail polish on the left foot of boy B. We think we have the names right, but they're identical, so no big deal. They're 17 now and usually remember their names from day to day. Story 37. Girl identical twin dad here. One girl had 2 identifying marks. She has a mole on the inside of her right leg and a visible vein on the bridge of her nose. That made it super easy. Story 38. Sharpie on the toenail when they were newborns. They are toddlers now and we can see the subtle differences, but we need to get a good look at their faces to tell them apart. Story 39. I do not have twins, but I have thought about this as I was in line for them. I would either color code them with clothing and write it down because who has brain power to remember that postpartum, or as a more long-term solution, put some sort of safe anklet or bracelet on them. I have not looked this up, but perhaps there is a baby-safe marking tool like a skin-safe marker or something. This may not actually exist. Story 40. My twins aren't identical, but you wouldn't know it from looking at them. The big tell that they have is their hairline. Baby A's hair falls straight down his forehead while Baby B swoops to the side naturally. Now that they're getting more hair, it's tougher to use that to tell them apart. But thankfully we can tell just by looking at them now. Story 41. I'm an identical twin. My mom used to put different socks on my feet. Stripy socks for me and plain socks for my brother. But as babies do, we kept taking them off, so I have no idea if I am the correct baby. Story 42. Twin here. My mom had baby bracelets with our names on them that we wore when we were babies. Eventually, as we got older, my parents were able to tell us apart because there were slight differences in our physical appearance that they noticed. One time my grandparents were babysitting, and one of us was sick and needed medicine. I think it might have been me. And my grandma put a safety pin in the shoulder of my onesie to tell which baby was supposed to get the medicine. Story 43. Mom of identical twin boys. I kept the baby A and baby B hats on them in the hospital, and when I got home, I painted one with blue polish on his big toe and color-coordinated assigned colors to them, which, funny enough, is now the color they openly choose or gravitate towards. Story 44. I didn't know I had identical twins until they were about 3 to 4 months old, as they were dichorionic. I had a cheek swab done at the hospital as part of a twin study. They had a 1-pound weight difference at birth, so if they were beside each other, I knew who was who. I rarely dressed them the same. I would coordinate. I mixed them up at night a lot. I would put them in the wrong crib. One has a fuller face and one is taller now. They are 10 years old now.